again, to focus on. But if we just stayed at mindfulness of breathing, it would be like walking through a portal or threshold and to enter the house and just never going any further and just saying, I'm home, but standing in the door jamb. And part of that is understanding that transformation requires movement. In this case, we're moving from one state to another. The more you move in and out of a place, that the more familiar you become with it. You don't have to like pay quite as much attention. It's like, I know it's 2 steps and I'm in the door. I know that because I go in and out this door all the time. I know how wide it is, you know, so I don't have to have a sense of my placement as I enter the doorway because I'm familiar with it. So mindfulness becomes not so much of something to be mindful of, it is something we've already become mindful of. So we don't have to keep starting at the beginning and spending a lot of time there once we have become mindful of it. So something that might have taken you 30 minutes to get through in the beginning can be like that after some time. And then you go on to other things. In the Greater Discourse of Advice to Rahula, Rahula was the Buddha's son. He ordained him at age 7. And one day when they were getting ready to go on alms rounds, and the Buddha was leading the monks and his son was behind him, and he looked upon the back of his father, and he was remarking to himself like how handsome his father was, how striking, how compelling he was in his speech, how his fame was spreading, his renown as a sage and as a holy man, and how many people loved him. And he said, and I'm his son. So I look like my father. He's training me, and he's giving everybody attention, but he's especially giving me attention as his son. I'm gonna be like him. And and the Buddha read his mind, and he told him that he needed to he said, Rahula, whatever, any kind of material form, whatever, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material form should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. So he was talking about, the aggregates, not just material form, but he was talking about feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. He was talking about this assumed illusory self, and that he had a wrong view if he wanted to be free from suffering. Because what if he gets disfigured? What if he ends up not being famous? What if he, so he was like, you have some suppositions in your mind that's built up around this pride of identity. And he said, that's going to be the cause, the root of all your suffering in this life. It didn't say that you actually had to go somewhere else to get out of the suffering. He said, you need to change your mind. You need to transform your mind and what you think of as solid, as permanent, as real. So when we talk about false and real, we're not necessarily talking about something that doesn't exist versus something that exists. We're talking about something that is inconstant, and constantly changing and shifting and morphing into something else versus something that is fixed and permanent. If we don't understand that, we will get completely messed up in our understanding. So understand the difference in false doesn't mean does not exist. It just means it is not stable, fixed, permanent, unchangeable. And if we expect it to be, when changes have to be made, we can find it too difficult to make the changes, to make the shifts. And because of something that we hold in our head, in our mind, our own ego clinging around that want or that perceived need, when something shifts, we can't handle it. We can't tolerate it because this is how I am. And that this is how I am doesn't really exist, or is a false sense of identification, identifying with something, identifying with thoughts. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because this is not woo-woo stuff. This is right where we live around every decision that we make in our life, constantly battling or up against the thought of an I that holds a fixed position, that holds a fixed view. And so we can't change. We're not malleable. We're not flexible. We can't shift. But when we become stayed, stuck, we become solid. And we identify with our position or our view. And so we miss what could be ours because we've made some view or position fixed and we're locked into it, whether it makes us happy or not. And you can tell when people hold to fixed views, whether that view is good for them or not. You could just tell by their behavior. You could tell by, their unhappiness, dissatisfaction. But that's my story and I'm sticking to it, you know. And we also need other people to give us some satisfaction around it. That's the other way that you can tell. Like, I don't need anybody in this room to make me happy. I can be all happy all by myself, and y'all could be all unhappy and grumpy, and I feel sorry for you. But I don't have to take it. I don't have to take it on, nor do I need it from you. That's why I have some I can give, because I got so much that I'm just manufacturing and building up over here that if you need a dose of this, take that. you know. And so you can tell when people are holding on to something because the winds are blowing and there's a sense of being unearthed, displaced, moved, and we're just hanging on to the pole for dear life because this I know, this is who I am. This, I could even say, is what I want. Well, the past 5 years, Buddha Master has helped me to acclimate to a lot of things that I don't want, you know. So I can just keep giving up things I don't want, or I can just give up you know. So I can give up one time, or I can have to give up constantly. So I try not to look at me having to give things up. I see everything that is not beneficial or that is not producing the harmony that I truly desire. I look at it as not giving those things up. I look at it as me giving up more of Pannavati. If I'm in the way, I can just die. If I'm useful, I can just stay. If, you know, I can be flexible. All I need to know is, or is that I am in a space where my conscience is clear in my action. Not that where my conscience is centered around Pannavati, what she wants or what she desires or what she even thinks she needs, but it's centered around my vow, which is to save living beings. That's it. So I ask every thought, the question, so that I can know whether I'm thinking about what Pannavati wants or whether I'm thinking without a thought of Pannavati. And this is constant practice. This is the way we get to know ourselves. Now, the Buddha said, when you commit an offense, you should confess it. There's something in the confession that so breaks down the ego, it's hard to do. It's hard to say, I was wrong. We would just rather like get over it, you know, act like it didn't happen. That's easier than saying I was wrong. So we get better at covering something. It's called covering something over with dirt. Like we can't agree, you know. Well, that's not exactly the same thing. Covering something over with dirt is what we use in as a monastic training. That when you can't agree on something, you just agree to forget about it then. You know, because you're going to have your view, I'm going to have mine, and we're deciding we're not going to wrestle about this. We just make it a non-issue. And that's called covering a matter over with dirt. But confession becomes hard because the fixed ego self doesn't want that, doesn't want to have to say that to you, doesn't want to have to, is seen as a dismantling, a stepping down of the self. But he says, this is our practice, because to not do it is to sustain and reinforce the ego mind. And then you'll never reach your goal. That's why it's called an evil view. Evil simply means, doesn't mean the devil is in it. The evil means it'll never take you to your goal. That's all. It'll just never take you to your goal. And so when we, you know, like argue to maintain and hold our position, if you can't understand my position at some point, just let it go there. You know, because we're thinking in two different ways. We hear things according to how we are, how our mind is, and how we break down and reflect on what we heard. So sometimes we just don't hear literally the same thing, and so we don't have to make it a bone of contention when it becomes clear that you can't clarify it for me, or I can't clarify it for you. There's no place else to go, because to go any further is going to devolve into a negativity. So you can just choose to drop it. So part of our practice then is learning how to do that. These are the ways that we practice on a daily basis. You know, um, it's not having our nose so buried in the book. It's correcting one thing that we reflect upon. So this meditation as a practice is getting to a place that one can reflect on something. So if we start with mindfulness of breathing, and we end with mindfulness of breathing, then we're just going to be reflecting on the in-breath and the out-breath. But we're not going to be reflecting on the things that hinder us, or the things that produce the merit that bring forward our good fortune in all kinds of ways, like being able to penetrate this wonderful Dharma, to be able to understand it, to be able to use it so that we have accomplishment in our daily life. It's not just to hear and know something, but it is to be able to walk it out in our daily life, and not walk it out with a struggle, but to be able to walk it out effortlessly. And without having that great hope, I wouldn't know why I would be in this, except that it holds that kind of promise for me, that there would be nothing that this life would bring, not even death itself, that could defeat my spirit of liberty and freedom. And it's a kind of freedom that you can't give me, and nothing that I attain in this world can give me. It supersedes any benefit that the world can give me. And that peace that we find in it is the peace of having an expansive and a clear conscience. So if my conscience doesn't offend me, after I have learned what's useful and not useful, not before I learn it, but after I learn. That's why some people who are very good-hearted people, but unbeknownst to them, because they haven't learned what is harmful or not harmful, because they haven't developed the discipline and haven't peered deeply, they harm without knowing it. They harm without intending to harm. But mostly the biggest offense is they harm without knowing they harm, without seeing the harm. And so they cannot prosper even on the path. There's always some obstacle, always something happening, always something, detrimental arising, always, always, always something. And they're perplexed because they're good people. And you're perplexed because you think they're good people. But it says all you have to do is know cause and effect. And if you ponder, if you ask the question, because our original nature that has been obscured or covered over by these habitual tendencies of ignorance, but the original nature is there. It just needs to be uncovered. And how we uncover is to ask the question based on the wisdom of the Dharma, to reflect on what the Dharma says until the resonance arises. And then you will know the truth. And that truth comes up from the inside. Now that's the connection with conscience. And so when your conscience condemns you, don't let your pride prevent it from doing its work. This is probably the hardest work we have to do. But this is how the Buddha instructed his own son. When he read his mind and what was in his mind, he knew that that would lead him down a wrong path. And so he told him how to think. Now we think of the body. There is something that animates this body. And we know that because when we're technically dead, the body is still there. It didn't go off somewhere at that moment of what we call death. It's still there. The fluid is there. The solidity is there. This body is here. So we know that there is something that animates or gives life to this. So we know that we are not the body. And when whatever that is, whatever you want to call it, you can call it spirit, you can call it soul, you can call it life, you can call it whatever name we want to give to it, or give it no name, but we know that it is there. And what's left when it leaves is not us. But we think that this is us because we're so closely fixed to it, tied to it. So he says it takes a critical, deep looking to see that that's not really true. Even though we just loosely, in general, say it is. But I am not the body. And he said, this is where you start. So you're not the earth, the air, the water, the fire, or the space that comprises the body. Later on, he talks about not even being the mind consciousness, but get to the physical part first, before we start getting into those kind of areas. Just start with the physical part. And so he said, Rahula, there was an instruction, but now I'm taking you to stage 2. Stage 1 was to bring your attention from the outer world inward. And one easy way to do that is to make your object the breath. That's all. Now, later we're going to talk about lots of other objects. I'm not going to go through in detail in weeks about them. I'll just rattle them off. No, but I can rattle off 40 or 50 different objects of meditation or subjects of meditation. And you can use whichever one you need at any time you need to use it. But he said, to draw you away from out there, that's the only purpose for concentrating on the breath. Now, in that day, they did a lot of practices, a lot of healing practices and so forth. It dealt with coming out of the Hindu tradition, pranayama, and all of that was connected within the Chinese diaspora. There was the qigongs and all of that, but he said, now I'm talking about spiritual development now. So all of that is not necessarily needed. Or maybe when you get to some higher levels, because if your lungs are weak, you got to build them up to be able to do certain things with your body, because your body has to also transform. But now we're not talking about transforming the body. We're just talking about coming to an agreement that we are not the body. That's what allows for there to be some transformation, to become aware of something else. But first, we have to become aware of what we think we are aware of and see if whatever view we hold. So it shouldn't take us a long time to get to mindfulness of breathing and to get beyond mindfulness of breathing. Breathing in long, I understand that's a long breath. Breathing out long, that's a long breath. Breathing in short, that's a short breath. Breathing out short, that's a short breath. Staccato breath, smooth breath. That's it. Just observing the characteristics and the qualities of breathing. But you notice that once you start doing that, paying attention to that was a long breath. That was a short out breath. That was a smooth breath. That was a rugged breath. You start to notice that the more you focus there, the more concentrated the mind becomes around what you are examining or investigating. That's all. This is not rocket science. It starts to take your attention away from a lot of other things, particularly other thoughts. And you're focusing your thought in one direction. Concentration, developing concentration. Now, when you don't have good habits and you concentrate on things, it's called fixation. And so you have to, so you're moving from being fixated on things to concentration is an upward flow, an upward trend. It is helping you to really examine and make so that you can make the adjustments you feel that you need to make around things, so that you have the focus, so that you have the intention becomes fixed. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it some point, sometime. Versus I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it now. Whatever thing it is that you're grappling with, not the breath, whatever thing you're grappling with, what makes you do it or not do it. There's a certain amount of self-determination you have to have. And that's based on how focused you are and committed you are on accomplishing that thing. So it's training us in that kind of way. Easy training tool, easy training mechanism. That's all this is. This mindfulness of breathing. So after a while, you can get to the place if you're doing it like I'm practicing whatever we talked about the last 3 weeks at home for 5 minutes a day. Okay, you gotta, you've got to. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You got to. You can't just hear it and you can't just read about it. This only works if you do it. And the reason why I don't want you to spend too much time at it is because I don't want it to become like a dead exercise that we just keep track of the time and saying, I'll just sit here, whatever, how long have I sat now? Okay, 10 minutes. I said I'm gonna sit for 30 minutes. What time is it now? 15 minutes, I mean, because your mind will get fixed in that kind of mode. That's why it's important to start with short periods of time, just enough time to acclimate you to the activity. And so I say 5 minutes. 10 minutes can even be a stretch. If you can't do 5 minutes, do 3 minutes. But you'll find even after the first few times, because everybody's got 5 minutes, everybody's got 15 minutes. But do we care enough to give it to this? To see what the fruit is, what the benefit is. Because what happens is when the mind settles down, our sense of time disappears. Time's not like a real thing the way we think it is, but it begins to disappear. The sense of timing. Now it comes back, but it comes back like as if your eyes are open and you're looking at a clock, that was an hour. You so bond, with the universality of motion and non-motion that you can know sitting in non-motion how much motion time has expired. And that's how you start to wake up without needing a clock. Like if you just said at 8 o'clock, I want to wake up. Now, in the beginning, set your clock too, because it can take a little bit of adjustment. But what you'll start to find is a minute before 8 o'clock, you'll wake up and you look, or it's 5 minutes to 8. It's in the vicinity. But the more you do it, the more it gets right on. Until you don't have to do it, then you can just trust. You can just set your internal clock, and you can wake at that time. These are the proofs that these things work, but you have to work them to know that they work. But when you work them and see that they work, it grows your confidence. Let me see what else is true in here. It grows your confidence that that these are not words on paper, or they're just not like woo-woo ideas of some people, but they're actually laws and principles that govern our world. So in a sense, it's science. It's just the only thing we call science is what we figured out. Once we figure it out, we call it science. But it didn't mean that it didn't exist before we figured it out. It's just that we just figured it out. So science is secondary to reality. It's just that part of it that we have unpacked and that we know. Having this mindset allows a framework for something to be made apparent to us that exists that we did not know before. And so he says, just bring your attention to your breath. That's a great object because it's always with you, you know, and just noticing. Now, when we breathe, we think about taking the breath all the way in and it's going down through our lungs and it's going through our whole body, you know, the whole oxygenation process. And, you know, it's coming out through our pores and all of that. So don't go do all of that. Just from outside air to inside, just from outside to inside. Where would that be? Where would you detect that? Yeah, from the nostril. So right outside the nostril to right inside. Now, there was a teacher in Thailand, his students couldn't get it. So he said, okay, watch the rise and the fall of your belly. And a lot of people had success with that. So that became another technique. I don't think that was Thailand, that was Burma. Burma. Mhm. And so that's what they do. They watch the rise and the fall of their belly. But here's the thing, the rise and the fall of the belly, it's already in by then. So I think his method was superior, but you can use rise and the fall of the belly if you need something to focus on. But it gets really fine, really thin if you go from external wind or air to internal. And just right there, don't follow it all in the body. It's going all down into my lungs now, and it's down in my toes, and it's coming out my pores. Just where it goes from outside air to inside air. Just do that right now. Just a few breaths. So we want to follow it. The mind wants to see where it's going. But you're saying, can you just detect where it was air out there to where it's internal? That's it. And internal, once it leaves that nostril, it's not your air anymore. It's out here. That was the first instruction. And that's mindfulness of breathing. But you notice that it does something else for you. We might have terms for it today. You got to ask Nancy. You know, because you know, something with the sympathetic nervous system, or something with the vagus nerve, and something with the something in your brain. I mean, like all of those. I mean, like we figured out things to call it and what it's doing and all of that, which is all well and good. You know, what we call it and how our terminology and all that. But one thing becomes undeniable is that it begins to regulate this system, this whole system. It has some kind of a calming effect. It begins, if you notice, it almost seems to lengthen the moment. Now, the lengthening of the moment is not actually the lengthening of the moment. It is creating space between the thoughts. So the gap between thoughts starts to lengthen. So when you read about this stuff, that sounds really mystical, the gap between the thoughts. It's not that. It means that thoughts are diminishing and one is becoming more and more present in the moment. So don't enroll in one of them $1,000 meditation courses, okay? They have some, I kid you not, $10,000 for 10 days. That means people have too much money. So you start to notice that the time seems to be expanding. But it's not that the time is expanding, but that you're freeing up the mind. You're stopping the constant chatter simply because you focused. That's it at one point. And you can do that as long as you need to do it to be ready to work. Because when we sit down at this, there is going to be some work. Or why are we sitting? It's just how we do that work that determines what kind of work it is, what the quality of that work is. And how you evaluate it, it is not at the time that you're doing the work, but looking at the results in your life, at how you handle all of the different things that come up in your life that are constantly moving and shifting. And is your mind moving and shifting with all of that? How your capacity for regulation or your capacity to be versatile. And some of us lean more on one side than on the other. I'm like, let's do something new all the time kind of person. You know, some people like steady as she goes. But we both have the same amount of work to do. That's why it's important to have a good spiritual guide, because you can spend a lot of time beating the bushes. You can spend your whole life. So that first part of meditation can take 2 sessions. That's why I always say I have a particular posture that I get into most times for meditation, or at least, well, not so much now, but you know, when I was trying to build it up. And because my whole body, that sympathetic nervous system or whatever it is, knows that when I get in that posture, in that place, this is what I want to do. And I actually do mine in my bed. Now, when I'm laying down, that might be I want to sleep, or I might want to watch television, you know, or I might just want to relax. But when I sit up, and I have a particular pillow that I sit on, it's like a sleep pillow, no, because I need soft at this point in my life. I have a foam on my top on my mattress that's about this thick. So when I sit in it with my 180 pounds, it crunches down to this. So I have this much space, like for my knees to be in a different position than my butt. I got it all laid out. So I am comfortable when I sit. I don't sit in a position and I can't hold it but 10 seconds, you know, because it's not about torture. It's about getting into a position that you can be in for a while. And for me, it's on my bed, on my pillow, my memory foam pillow, with my phone on my mattress. And my knees are like, I don't feel them. I know I have knees, but I don't feel it. Not bothering me. No. And where if my knees can go down, but say they couldn't, if they had to go up, that's fine. I got foam there holding them. My ankles might be down lower, but I've got the foam holding the ankles. It's not hard like on the floor or on a pillow. And even if you can't sit that way, find out how you can sit. Maybe one leg up and one leg out is how you can sit, or vice versa. But you can find your position. And if you find it, you will be able to lengthen your sitting time gradually. And so you just sit for those few moments, just enjoying the tranquility and the peace of the sit. Your mind cannot overrule it. It will reign in your mind. And you will begin to experience something. And these experiences occur in stages. But as you get that little comfort zone, he said, here's a little tip you can use, Rahula. He said, whatever internally belonging to oneself that is solid or that is liquid, fluid, like blood and so forth, or that is air, like the breath, or that is, what did I leave out? Fire, just the heat and mobility of your body. He said, whatever any of that is, this is how it should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. So that's something that we have to acknowledge in the mind. There is blood, but I'm not blood. There is wind, but I'm not wind. There is fire, but I, Pannavati, am not fire. There is space, like because things are going through all kinds of veins and tunnels and tubes in our body, but I'm not that. And it says, and that's what you focus on. I'm not this body. Even I have thoughts, but I'm not the thoughts. And he says that when one sees, and how long do you do this? He says, when one sees thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one will become disenchanted with those elements, and the mind will become dispassionate towards them. You know how like when you fall out of love with somebody. Like when you fall out, It's out. You can maybe even want to try to put it back together, because it's beneficial or something, but you can't put it back together. You might decide you'll just go with it, but the disenchantment will still be there. When you fall out, you fall out. So he says that we have an enchantment with this body and this mind. We're enchanted. I'm enchanted with Pannavati. But the more I do this practice, the less enchanted I will be with her. And the more freedom will be experienced. So sometimes I get so tired of her. I really do. But yet I do the things that reinforce her so she ain't going nowhere. You know? And that's the craziness of it all. And sometimes we say we like ourselves just as we are, but we really don't. We really don't. I mean, there's some parts we can like, the parts that are of good quality, you know? But it comes with a whole lot of other stuff. We can maintain the quality without the fixation, the enchantment on the self, because when we really look at it, that enchantment is tied to things having to be a certain way for me to be okay. And that's the downfall of the enchantment. My father used to take me to a place outside of Maryland, or within Maryland, when I was growing up, called the Enchanted Forest. And I loved going to that place. They had Jonah and the whale. They had, it was a theme park of Bible stories. I mean, they didn't have rides, they didn't go up and down, but I learned those Bible stories from the time I was a child, to go and see the big whale. Was it Jonah and the whale? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The big, and I'd see these, and I think about those stories, and I just loved those stories, and I was like in hog heaven. And then we didn't go for maybe 1 year or 2 years. And then he took me again, but I was 2 years older, and I was no longer enchanted because I'd grown up. And this is what happens to us when we meditate. We grow. We expand beyond our infantile capacities. Yeah. And we start to see a world that doesn't revolve around us. We're the center of our world. We are. And the next layer is our family, somebody that we love, our children, our spouse, our boyfriend, girlfriend. Next to that is, maybe somebody that we're in business with, or we're doing things with, our circle of friends. Next to that is, but it's just going in concentric circles around a self that sits at the center of the universe. We already know that's not true, but yet we live as if it is true. And so that center starts to diminish and folds in to just being a part of the whole universe without demarcation. And one starts to feel free from oneself. One finds a kind of enjoyment. This is what he said happens. I'm not telling you what's happening with me. I'm just telling you this was the instruction. He says, having gone to the forest or the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, um, or to your bedroom, or whatever, sit down, folding your legs crosswise just for balance, setting your body erect, not leaning back like this because you're going to have back fatigue. But that's why I'm always sitting up, because it comes from so long meditating that I don't even need back on the chair because it's not in the right position. You know, setting body erect, establishing mindfulness in front of him, ever mindful, Just breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in long, he understands. I breathe in long. Breathing in short, he understands. I breathe in short. Okay. I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body of breath. The whole body of breath means that whole inhalation as it moves from outside to inside. That's why if you follow it, you've already lost your expectation of concentration because you're running all over the body. But just from here to here, the whole body of breath, just as it crosses that one little area. And on the exhalation, the whole body of breath, just as it crosses from inside to outside. That's all. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. He said, but this is what will happen. He said, he trains thus. Training. That means we're training now. He says, he trains thus. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. So that's your goal, to tranquilize. You know what happens when something is tranquilized?
Still,
What else?
you don't feel it.
You don't feel it. So these experiences that we have, like the sense of the body disappearing, it's tranquilizing. Now, it might be that in this process, something is being created. Maybe some, we're like a chemical suit. Maybe some hormones are being released that's doing the tranquilizing. I don't know what the cause or what the reason is. I don't even have to know. All I have to know is that if I do it and I do it correctly, this is what will happen, whether I have the scientific data behind it or whatever. And so he says, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing bodily formation. When that happens, you'll know it. You'll know it because the body will become tranquil. And then he says something happens after that. Then he trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. So I can't give myself, keep bringing up self-talk. Well, is this going to work? Oh, I don't think this will work. What time is it now? This is where one trains, because one's mind will do that. That's what it does. It's what it always does. So we're training it. I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe out, experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe in, experiencing mental formation, thoughts trying to arise. No, you're just sitting here all copacetic, and all of a sudden, thought rise. What time did I have this meeting this afternoon? You're hours from it, but all of a sudden, that thought will come in, or thought of something you have to do tomorrow, or thought of something you did yesterday. But he says, that's okay. That will happen. So when it happens, you say, why are these thoughts coming to me? That will happen. But you don't go with the thoughts and say, well, or just like, I forget it, then I just can't do this. He says, when that happens, he trains thus. I shall breathe out in, tranquilizing that mental formation. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. So he's saying if you just stay with the course, with what you're doing, that thought may come and invade the mind, but it can't remain. It can only remain if whoever or whatever I actually am attaches to the thought and makes it. That's what allows the thought to stay there. But if you don't attach to it, it will rise up. It'll abide for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or whatever, and it'll go away. There's no thought you can have that you can make stay. It will leave, every single thought that we have, whether we meditating or not. Even if you're mad with somebody, you can't hold on to it for so long. It starts to float away. You're like, wait, I'm not through being mad with them yet. You know, we can't stop it. But the more we recognize that, the more easily we will let it arise. It has nothing to do with me, and it'll move off. This is training, though, you see. This is training. We have to do it. And he says, you'll know you're successful with that because you're training. I shall breathe in, experiencing the mind. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mind. And I've trained, thus I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. All of that has to come before I shall breathe in, concentrating the mind. So you see those steps that are required before we can actually come to a place of concentration. We can't just sit down, I'm concentrating. But there are internal training that we're doing. That's why you got to do this. And you got to do it at home. Those are the steps. And he says, and this is the next thing that happens. I shall breathe out, concentrating mind, then I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. And then he goes to the next. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, contemplating impermanence. I shall breathe out, contemplating impermanence. So when Buddha Master is teaching on contemplating impermanence, you see where we are in the process. If you want to run with the big dogs, you got to get up to that place in your training, your individual personal training, or you're not going to be able to contemplate impermanence. And you're not because you haven't liberated the mind. And you haven't because you haven't concentrated the mind. And you haven't because you haven't yet gladdened the mind. And you haven't because you haven't yet experienced the mind. And you haven't because you haven't tranquilized mental formations. And you haven't because you have not breathed in and out with pleasure, and you haven't because you have not experienced the rapture, and you haven't because you have not tranquilized your bodily formation, and you haven't because breathing in long, you haven't understood this is a long breath, and short, this is a short breath. So you see how much is accomplished just from starting at that one stage. It will take you to the next stage. It will take you like a train driving you. You can't go there without being on the vehicle. This is a vehicle that will transport you. Think of it like that for now, as a vehicle. And then when that's done, he says, this is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it will be of good fruit and it will be of great benefit. He says, and when it's developed and cultivated this way, there's other ways you can do it. He's giving you right mindfulness now, connected with meditation. When it is done in and developed and cultivated in this way, even your final in-breaths and out-breaths will be known as they cease. They will not be unknown. So if you want to talk about how to die, this teaches you how to live and also how to die. That you don't have to have any trepidation for the future because you'll constantly be in the now, whether it's in this world or some other world. He says, and after you've done all of that, then is when you will practice loving kindness, right? Because your thoughts are elevated. You're in a different state now, and ill will be abandoned. So if ill will is your issue, and you get mad with people all the time, or you're feeling somebody's done something to you, they may always do something to you. Is your happiness going to be dependent upon that? No, he said, you can now focus on loving kindness, and it will abandon the ill will. If you focus on compassion, cruelty will be uprooted. If you focus on altruistic joy, discontent, jealousy, and envy will be uprooted in you. If you focus on equanimity, then aversion will be uprooted. And if you focus on the perception of impermanence, the conceit, I am, will be uprooted. These are our tools. But if we want meditation. Now, from when this is done, we can go into some other ones. But we got to start with this. And we got to do it at home or in your car while you're waiting for your friend in the store, or just a few minutes here and there till it becomes familiar with you, till you experience the benefits of it. Those were the benefits. But once you start to experience the benefits, then you'll slip off with it. It's like sneaking to be away with your lover. A few minutes here, a few minutes there. Just makes the whole rest of your day go good. Just to hear the sound of his voice. Just to, whatever brings you that kind of joy of the presence of that energy. This will do that for you. But you alone have to do it. Now, that's why I don't like meditating in a big group. Because once you become open to this, your field expands. The more you diminish self, the broader your field gets. So suddenly now I'm in a room with everybody, all these thoughts popping off all over the place. That's why I like to do mine at home. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. But I'm here with you. I want to do it. I don't want to do it. This is boring. I can't get it. Now all of that's popping up in the field of vibrations, right? And so I'm getting all of that. But maybe if I'm doing it and I am still and I am settled, maybe you can get some of mine. So as a sacrifice to others, we might sit in group here and there. But what's important is to get it and become accomplished in it so that you can reap the benefits of it. Now y'all can decide by next week whether you still want to go further with meditation because it's training. If not, I'll give you more Buddha stories. and we could just talk about Buddhist principles. But this is the trading part right here, okay?
May the merit from our time here today, listening, learning, and training, may it be given freely, just as the elements are, taking nothing, abiding naturally. Nothing is ours. May our practice be for the benefit of our family, friends, and all sentient beings. May they attain Nibbana immediately, in everlasting harmony and peace.
Okay, so please practice this week because I want to take you to the next stage the next time we get together. And and it's to just acclimate you to we have a spider, and I'm through. We have a big spider. He's really big. I mean, his legs, he's about this. We have 3 of them now. And they're out, it's outside in the bushes, but they string all the way to the branch of a tree, all the way down to a blade of grass. He's now coming across the park, the driveway. I mean, and he's about that big. His body is about this big. Well, now it's 3 of them. And his thread is his web is golden, and it is the most beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing, and I'm just watching how he's spinning. He's building a castle, not just a spider web, but he has like one frame, and now he's got a second frame. Now he's got a third frame. I mean, he's got mansions, and well, I forgot why I was telling you this story. There was a purpose to this story.
Practice.
Oh, yeah. And so just looking at how he is building, bit by bit. And when he accomplishes one, he didn't keep trying to cram more into that. He moved to a different, it's like changing states. And that's how this will be for you. We know about this world, but this ain't the only world in the whole universe, in the whole galaxy, in the whole, and and they're contiguous, right? It's not like here's a world and then there's nothing. Oh, there's a world and then there's a world, but they're contiguous like this. So what happens in this practice is we start thinning the line between the realms. That's what that crossing is, that we can we can cross those boundaries, and there's an expansion in our acquaintance with the universe. That's, so that's how we come to know how things actually are, more than just what we can perceive with our limited perception and our limited faculties here. We don't even use all of our faculties here, the ones we have. Most of them are dormant. In the ordinary mind, they're dormant. But they start to wake up. We start to see things. We start to hear things. We start to know things. We start to teletransport. We start to, it's not like going after supernatural powers. These are natural powers that we just have not accessed because we haven't passed through the veil. We're stuck in the mind, that ordinary mind, but he's telling us how to move beyond it. So you can call this religion if you want. You can call it, science if you want. You can call it philosophy if you want. You don't have to call it anything. You can just call it life, the path of life, whatever, or nothing. But I'm just saying, more can be known. And these simple techniques are the way that we start traveling on that path. Okay, so I'm gonna test you next week, because that determines whether we go further or not. Yes,
The Sutta reference.
Sutta number 62.
62. Thank you.
In the Majjhima Nikaya. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Venerable.